Coolest pirate hideaway ever. Yeah. A shirtless, tattooed man wearing leather pants shows up on a beach with no memory and promptly talks a young boy into going on a series of adventures with him on a pirate ship. That's either the starting of one hell of a Chris Hansen video or the starting of a Yakuza game. And luckily, in this case, it's the general premise of Like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii. From here on out, it's all just going to be known as Like a Pirate. Set 6 months after Infinite Wealth, Majima wakes up on Rich Island with a blank slate. He's got no past, no memories, just the lingering sense of general mayhem that he always exhibits. As most amnesiac shirtless men are bound to do, he gets taken in by a local kid who pulls him out of the mess, and they kick off a whole new kind of adventure. With no idea who he is but an unshakable instinct, Majima throws together this ragtag pirate crew to chase down both his lost identity and a legendary treasure that's tied to Hawaiian pirates and exiled Yakuza. This game is set to release for PlayStation 4, 5, Windows, Xbox One, Xbox Series X and S on February 24th. And if you don't subscribe, I will for sure die. Once the video goes live, I'll be having a question and answer period if you have any questions on this. It's a side title. It's a 20-hour jaunt into the wild unknown as Majima. You're sailing and swinging and singing across 3 different locations. Whether it be the main games or the side games, I've always felt that it's that main character and their charisma that moves them forward, and Majima's got that. That's what drives this game forward too, despite its issues. Now let's break down the core a little bit. The first island and maybe the first hour or two of the game revolves around island life, meeting people, learning systems, and fighting off a contingent of pirates led by the ever-present Keith. Keith, who I kicked the shit out of like 11 times, with the fighting system that's a real-time battle in this game versus Infinite Wealth's turn-based. It's enclosed spaces, whether it's a small segment of a city block, the deck of a ship, or the inside of a store. Once you meet up with enemies, it curbs that area off, and you get to battling. This is a series of light and heavy attacks, the ability to sidestep or dodge, as well as now the ability to leap up into the air to clear space or set up drop attacks, depending on your mood and what form you end up taking of the 2 that you have available to you. The ability to leap into the air, regardless of the form, is very close to being a game changer, but I think actually falls a bit short, which I'll explain in a bit. You can leap into the air, as I said, setting up a flipping leg drop or toss out your knives. It can also help you sometimes just dodge the jackasses who hang around the edges of all the battles trying to take you out with handguns. Now, the basics out of the way, you have 2 pirate forms for Majima. The first is Mad Dog. This is nuts and knives, up close smashing people with quick boxing moves, flashy kicks, stabbing them with the only weapon that you have in this form, which is your trusty knife, or grabbing a random item in the game world that's available for tossing. Blocking and dodging both have their own idiosyncrasies, but the dodge in particular is excellent, with you able to slip behind an enemy and pull off easier moves, including heat moves. Like prior games, those heat moves depend on how much you've built up by fighting prior. They can depend on the locations, the enemy spots in the game world, as well as specials that you've upgraded. At this time, you can also transform into a bunch of cackling copies of yourself with the Doppelganger ability. Then you have the Sea Dog style. This is dual cutlasses, pistol, and later a grappling hook. This is, in essence, your equipment style mode, and more of a range style where you can toss your cutlasses like boomerangs or Captain America shields to slash through enemies, as well as its own heat attacks and madness gauge attacks, which includes playing the fiddle to bring a bunch of sharks to your area and eat everybody. With the grapple here, you can explore in map open areas as well, but in combat, you can use it to pull enemies to you or away from you and set up combos. The reality of the Yakuza games is that I've always felt their combat is a bit messy in a way, but it's a chaotic mess that is still very nice when it comes to the replication of violence in this world. There's times where it's finicky or times where you get hit and it's just too difficult to really tell who did the hitting, but in the end, that's just the way it is. You are a Yakuza. There's a lot of backstabbing anyway. There are some cool upgrades, and there are upgrades that even unlock after you end up buying the first series of upgrades. Now, switching between these forms was described initially as somewhat seamless. I never had that exact feeling. When I did it manually, there's a bit of a delay there. Next up is sailing. Sailing is initially sectioned off onto very small mapped zones and lighthouses, which are places you can fast travel to once you've unlocked them. Here is where you track down also your pirate clans. You explore islands. You have real-time fights against other pirate captains using machine guns and rocket launchers and side-blasting cannons on your ships and just reveling in the occasional boat ramming. firing machine guns from the front of the ship and constantly trying to keep enemies from turning broadsides to you to unleash their cannons while also using the ability to boost your ship and do drifts to get your cannons on them feels awesome. That's right, you basically Fast and Furious Tokyo drift your way around in these ships when you turn on the boost, and that allows you to get your broadsides on somebody more quickly. This is also where another section of the game can come up. When your ship is damaged or your crew is hurt, you can go into what's called deck mode, where your first hand takes over the ship, but it basically doesn't really move anywhere, and you can heal up characters that are on the deck that have been hurt, as well as shoot an additional type of weapon not connected to the main ship, and that's an RPG. In this game, 8 cannons is fun, but a single RPG may be more fun, especially because it's manually aimed by you. It is an odd system. It feels distinctly like they needed something else or felt that they needed something else to add to this. It works well enough. Upgrading your ship with cannons, flamethrowers, laser beams, more armor, new paint, cool-ass sail designs can all be done outside of combat. And for some of them, prior to combat as well. It just depends on how you enter it. And let's talk about one of the main ways in which you can do this and what I liked in this game so much. You have the open world battles. Those are great. But you also have the Madlantis tournaments where you can see just how much care has been put into all of the systems. Where the game excels here, where it absolutely shines, is the ship-to-ship battles and the crew systems. Each crew you get, recruit, or randomly decide to join you. Anyone accustomed to games and tier systems will understand them, S, A, B, C, etc. You can leap in instantly and understand that someone rated as an F on cannons and ship upkeep, and A or C on attack and defense should probably be placed in a particular spot on the ship. The first major stations are related to ship combat itself. Characters can be placed on cannons on both sides, as well as the machine guns at the front of the ship. A first mate can also be assigned to oversee them, and any skills he or she may have as a first mate can be applied. For example, extra smoke bombs, or extra additions to attack or defense, or bonuses to distracting enemies. You've got disaffected idle fans to streetwalkers who've expired past their instant buy dates and want to keep adventuring to mascots. They've all explored the world, and they all have something to offer, and you can find them everywhere on the little islands, as well as Hawaii, as well as Madlantis. Then you have the boarding squads. They go out onto the decks after the cannon type of battle has happened, when you decide to go for deck-to-deck combat. Each squad is filled with a squad leader who may or may not have special skills for that spot, and then they have their own small group of fighters. What I liked here is the game aggregates that squad to give you an overall rating as well for just quick perusing. Then you have the support squad, which are your backline offense or defense, and can be activated like spells or potions in any fight, giving you the upper edge if you need it. Yes, when you fight other ships and you board, their support staff can also be used for them. This is a great way to make sure that the world feels at least slightly more realistic within the basis of the balls-out craziness that actually is going on. Even you leveling up your pirate crew and naming them and seeing other pirate crews with their names, like seafaring gangs, works really well to sell a bit of that fiction. And a lot of this is replicated when you're sailing around and you end up meeting ships in the open world spots, but that's still pretty hit and miss. At first, sailing is ultimately disappointing. It's in super small areas, and to move quickly, you sail through boost rings like friggin' Sonic, and you smash into items that are just laid in a row. I didn't expect massive locations, but for many hours in the starting of the game, the locations themselves, the little seas you go to, are insanely small, with just a couple moments of sailing through those setup boost lines, smashing perfectly lined up supplies, and then either go into a lighthouse or to some plot point. They have 1 to 3 lighthouses per area as well. Luckily, hours into the game, those areas do get a bit larger on some maps, but they're still oddly traced with those boost rings versus true sailing, which you can do, but not a lot happens outside of those spots. Sometimes it's some relationship moments as well as some plot moments, but really most of it's contained on that area. This may be where Pirates shows just how difficult it can be to balance this many systems in a shorter game. Take, for instance, resource gathering for upgrades. This has to be done. The game's components have to be collected. Majima himself has a ton of skills needing cash and renown level to unlock. You have ship upgrades and unlocks and materials for that. You have cooking systems, and having them all set up this way doesn't always feel great. The rigid mentality in making sure that a smaller game like this has so many parts of the larger game means that, especially when it comes to sailing open areas, you start to feel like there's a copy-paste going on here. This is also right away noticeable in the massive amount of items consistently pick up in the game world. Thousands of briefcases litter the world. Thousands. Glowing items everywhere, random items in every crook and cranny. Without a doubt, it feels like more of this game is hitting the B button than I've experienced in any prior Yakuza, and that's because it's intrinsically tied to in particular, ship upgrades. This can also be very noticeable in the city areas where you're going to have an NPC randomly bark, I need money, or I'm hungry, or I need this, or I need that, and 30 feet away is that item, but it's not an item you can give them. It's just a bark that continues throughout the game world. Now, you'll also have the island expeditions. It's hard to describe it until you play it, but it's very mechanical, and honestly, those spots usually involve a small fight, breaking down a barrier, going to another place, small fight, breaking down a barrier, going to another place, facing a boss, getting a treasure. That's it. There is no real exploring even later on in those, or at least not a great deal of it. Happily, though, in Hawaii, in general, it is exactly what you would expect. A sprawled out metropolis, an area of awesome shops, Segway rides, beaches, mini games, bounty hunting, aptitude tests, and pirate recruits. And it also adds strength to a vital part of this game, which is relationships. Walking around, talking to characters, getting prompted for quick discussions, taking a Segway across town to buy a fish taco for some random pirate recruit that demands that before he joins. Those all happen. Engaging in games with the crew, as well as just taking pictures of and randomly throwing the hang loose sign towards different passerbys, makes you become friends with them and then add them to your friends list on your phone. Then you leap on board your ship to give characters gifts. You throw some feasts, maybe end up playing some music, doing some karaoke. There's even a mini Animal Kingdom part of the game on your first island that lets you feed and upgrade and even sometimes team up with animals you've collected around the game world. This is also the place where Pirate is at its strongest, where you show Majima and his ability to get people around him to want to follow him. That magnetism, his infectious attitude and gung-ho spirit brings all these people together, even if once together some elements don't feel perfectly fleshed out. When it comes to the mini games, you have things like cooking, which I think is actually the most fun. You get different ingredients, sometimes having different actions that you can do, blowing on the fire to start it, ladling out parts of soup, cutting up vegetables, and so on. You can also leap into dragon cart races, deliver food across the city, and help friends find love. When I got bored, I would leap into the arcades as well for a bit and just play some Space Harrier or Virtual Fighter. There's also a vocational school to train up your character on more abilities, and tons of gambling games from claw arcades to blackjack. That's Hawaii pretty much out of the way, but I wanted to cover a bit of Mad Atlantis. Even though you get to it pretty quickly in the game, let's just say, well, it is a wild-ass place. It's hilarious to explore with a 12-year-old kid in tow as well. They just don't care in this game. I love it. It's deceptively larger than initially looks, with all kinds of environmental storytelling, from guards fighting off people who want into restricted zones, to black market deals gone wrong, to someone just literally being choked right next to you on the dock, to the women. Somehow this location has a reverse ratio of prostitutes versus Johns, and it is hilarious because they're standing around talking about the way their clients get off, bad payments, ugly men, anybody wanting to leave or not leave, wanting to learn skills to get better at their job. It cracked me up. I love the no care attitude that they put into this spot. It's also graphically one of the better looking places in the game. And yes, that's if it was prostituteless or ray trace prostituting was turned off. Graphically, the game is a mix of the expected and unexpected. Sitting back and looking around Mad Atlantis feels like you would expect a modern Pirate's Cove to look like, sort of a bit like Vegas and the Mormon state joined together, soaking in the neons and flashing lights as everyone mills about, breaking out in fights, and a Pirates of the Caribbean atmosphere that exudes every step there. Also places like Hawaii, where it continues to shine with little spots to go, stores, and surprises. Excellent environmental storytelling in a lot of those spots. While combat on foot is almost identical to the games we played before, the ship battles also look excellent here, with bits of the ship exploding off and churning decks and good water effects. At least good enough for this game. Turn-based or not, I've always actually liked the way the Yakuza games look. Even if at times you get lost or a dodge here or there, you can't quite time perfectly, it always feels fun, and every single time it really exemplifies whatever character you've taken on. Performance-wise, it runs great even on lesser systems, and it's aiming for 60 FPS on the consoles. Other than some frame drops, especially in what is one of the coolest places in all the Yakuza games, which is Mad Atlantis, you get these busy spots where you get some FPS drops. Overall, though, it runs about as well as you would expect, and honestly, many times looks phenomenal. There are places where you can certainly tell that they are taking their issues and sort of trying to hide them, and that includes those island drop-off locations with some very basic geometry, but still, for a side title like this, a lot going on. Speaking of a lot going on, let's talk about the voice acting. Matt Mercer as Majima. Bold choice. Honestly, I liked it. Dude's got the chops and he delivers for the most part. If you're the type who needs their Yakuza experience raw and unfiltered, you can always just switch to the Japanese voices and pretend you're in some high-stakes foreign pirate film instead of a spin-off side hustle that we are playing right now. Speaking of spin-offs, since this isn't a full-fledged Yakuza game, don't go in expecting the same marathon-length cutscenes or deep existential gangster debates. They're here, sure, especially in the opening when you're dumped into the island with no idea who you are. As the game rolls on and gets into the main game proper, the cutscene count noticeably slims down, and it keeps everything much leaner, with them going away from voiced interactions for the most part to just one word or two words and then a bunch of reading. Overall, I think the voice work is pretty solid. 2 or 3 exceptions in this game for characters that you deal with many times. They'll pop up that I felt were pretty off when it came to their accents, but whatever. I felt generally the same way about the sound. Yes, it's still that high on a sugar binge, arcade-style explosion of sound effects, but they fit. The chaos of the streets, people scream and bolt when you whip out a sword in the middle of a mall, or when you impale some poor bastard so hard his head becomes his feet. It sounds exactly as over-the-top as you would expect. It's not as thick or filled out as we see in other open-world games. The Yakuza games never really had. After a while, things start to all blur together too, making some locations a bit less distinct than they should be audibly, but they certainly are visually. In some particular areas, you are going to hear the same vocal bark 100 times minimum, if not many, many more, and quite often one after the other, after the other, after the other. You can walk down an area in Madlantis and everybody's saying the same thing multiple times. No matter what you're doing, it repeats a lot. Felt like a bug to me. I just don't see that they would want it repeated that often. So I'm assuming that'll be curbed a little bit. It was actually grating, especially as you wanted to look around and see these things. You just consistently hear the same one-liners. When it came to the music, this is pure Yakuza with songs from the prior games as well as some new tracks specific to this one. And if you like, you can just add those songs to your track list and keep going. Everything from Japanese-styled songs, J-pop ripoffs, fake idol bands, and some pirate theme songs that were catchier than I expected and probably wanted. What I did enjoy here is the main song can be sang by your crew as you're sailing as a shanty, and that was great. When it comes to the fun factor, how's everything come together? While Pirate feels in many ways like the prior titles, I will say that once you get a good number of activities unlocked, I found myself liking this mix a great deal. The bounties might have been the most enjoyable here because they are everywhere in the game, just like the recruits, and range from I can do this to Jesus, that was a bad choice. They offered a fresh set of distractions from the normal activities and roving gangs of bands that consistently seem to be running on like 48 hours of sleep and think that a good idea is to get in a street fight with a dude who has no shirt on, wears leather pants, and has a small child as a companion. Because that right there is nature's stay away sign. I don't know how it happens, but here we are. They're also the only company I've ever seen that could name a game and put pirate in the title, and then a great deal of the first couple hours has you on land. Whatever idiosyncrasies I ran into, there was something that was very Yakuza-like here. And I really do like him as the main character. I find that character interesting. Putting all the crew together with him, seeing the relationships there, which the game actually matures a great deal, was awesome. Those were highly enjoyable. At the same time, there was a great deal of a feeling of copy-paste. I would have liked the sailing areas, even when they got larger, to be much bigger because of the way that the sailing is actually done. It feels like here's a bunch of space with almost nothing really going on. Some great combat, always going to back you up there. And I really did like the tournaments in this one. Almost every one of the Yakuza games has a tournament system of some kind. I thought that this one was highly enjoyable. The way you enter the Coliseum and the way you get in those fights was really cool. Not what I expected. But what I did expect was them to explain Majima as a character, and it's held up by him. Where Ichiban always looked like a dejected Thundercat and carried 1,500 virgins worth of innocence in that giant brain of his, Kiryu was always the stoic man who would build a bridge over a garden hose if it meant saving somebody from getting wet. But here, it is absolutely balls to the wall, even though he's a good guy. It's just the way that he is delivered and the celebration of mayhem he has that is so fun. As you guys know, I rate games on a buy, wait for a sale, deep sale, or never touch rating system. I love so many ideas here, and the combat with the crew and its systems, and just the leveling overall is awesome. I really enjoyed Hawaii, and I enjoyed a great deal of Madlantis. What I did not was the island and treasure seeking, which is weird because this is a pirate game. Like it or not, also, this demystifies Majima. It's a process that started in the prior games as his art continued in parallel stories across the previous titles. So while not always incredibly mysterious as a character, it is a character that we didn't know perfectly inherently from the original games. And that's going to result in you playing out this character here and having to decide if this is the kind of attitude that you were hoping for when it came to him as a full fleshed out character. I was fine with it, but I could see some people going like, this character isn't necessarily for me. I would say if you're a huge fan of Yakuza, this is worth getting, especially if you like the way the Yakuza games fights and overall theme and structure are delivered. It has a ton of different unique experiences that are merged into one. A lot of that are the meat and bones of the series proper, so you're not going to get ripped off with having a bunch missing. However, if this is your first Yakuza game, be prepared for a game that can feel like 1,000 pieces of a jigsaw that once put together is still on a shaky table and at times has to actually be helped to be put back together. That's it for me. Give it a thumbs up if you like it, thumbs down if you didn't join the Patreon. It hugely helps out the channel. If you want reviews like this, agree or disagree, I can guarantee one thing: don't get paid for reviews. Peace out. Enjoy the rest of your week. Check out the Patreon.
Damn. Atlantis Security paying us reparations? Certainly didn't expect that.
Captain, you rocked!
He's right. You're cut out for this.
Think I'm gonna fit quite nicely with this Madlantis crowd? I'll be just fine.